I'll change it later. There's actually even more stuff that I'm gonna do in there. I'm gonna put like full bibliographic information in and stuff like that.
It's you, overachiever.
No, I'm just trying to cover bases.
Okay. We are live according to what I see on my screens.
I mean, I believe you, but the YouTubes will tell a different story
All
for the next 20 minutes until it comes up. You
right,
get
I'm going
my
to make you the host so that you can.
Ooh, we gained another. Oh, it says we're live already.
We are live according to what I see.
Sorry.
Now I can switch back to the cat. I also have an avatar of me,
You look
but it doesn't.
absolutely fine. I like,
I well, I keep beauty mode on in Zoom,
wait a
so
minute. What?
I think it's still in there. It should
There's a
be. There's
beauty mode in Zoom?
Yeah, there used to be. I never would take it off. I think it's under video settings where yeah, you can
Shut up.
yes, it's called touch up my appearance.
What?
Yeah. You want to know what I really look like?
I can't even tell.
It's
Like,
very subtle. It's very subtle, but
yeah,
it's
like I
supposed
can't even
to
tell.
like
So it's just light airbrushing.
it lightly blurs the surface of your head so that you don't look like a as gnarly.
You don't look as gnarly.
So I know I
What?
posted this, but
Oh yeah, that thing is so cute.
yeah, I was really pleased with it until I wrote the names and my handwriting. I'm like, I don't like the way I wrote the hand, I don't like my handwriting. So
I don't know what I expected when I was like picturing it in my head, but I didn't picture it to look like that good.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like I expected, not yours, just in general, like
yeah,
the general concept.
yeah, it was I mean, it was pretty simple. You cut out all of these like um I can't remember how many slices or wedges are. I think there are 6 wedges. So you end up with, 6 wedges on the top and then 6 wedges on the bottom.
Hmm.
And you trace all of the country stuff. And you can see like here, the country doesn't quite match up well.
I didn't even notice until you
Right in there.
pointed it
Yeah.
out.
But I think that's where like it's stitched separately, maybe. And anyway, but yeah, it's just like I did like a little tiny back stitch along the country's outlines. And then I used they're fabric markers and this
Mhm.
is silk, like it's silk dupioni. So, um, yeah, I just sort of like outlined in blue and then interlined in like it's actually like a fluorescent pink.
Mhm.
And I thought it looked really good. I was like, I totally did not expect that it would come out looking like kind of cool. And then I used different colors of thread. I have yellow thread and orange thread to do the different lines of what are those latitude. And then you're supposed to do different colors for the lines of longitude. And at that point, I was just like, it's going to be a lot. I could do, I guess this is Capricorn and is it Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of
Don't even
Capricorn, or
ask
the
me.
yeah. In any event, I was like, okay, I've learned all I'm going to know about or 19th century geography because I mean, some of this stuff is not accurate anyway anymore.
Hmm.
So it's definitely from a place and time.
Wow. That was that was quite the hanging about intro.
Yeah. So,
We
but I just
go
thought it
ahead,
was really
honey.
cool that this like just reading that paper, Tandy
Yeah.
Hirsch's paper, I was like, what? I know exactly what she's talking about. I have made one.
I wonder if you were like the only one that knew what she was talking about because I certainly didn't.
Well, and I kind of wondered, oh, was maybe she the person that did that pattern for piecework, but she wasn't. It was somebody else that did the pattern for
But
piecework.
maybe it
So
was someone that read her article and was like,
could be,
"Hey,
or yeah, I mean, just somebody within the same like community of study just happened to know, I didn't do a whole lot of looking to see like where these people are from.
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm."
but I mean, I'm sure we could probably connect Tandy Hirsch and the woman who did that pattern,
I
in
mean, if
some
not,
way.
I'll just do it in my head and say it happened, even if it didn't. Hi, Jen.
Hey, Jen.
Um, so for people like slowly trickling in, since we uh YouTube actually took the live and made it live really quickly tonight, which is odd. Um, Tonight we're here for our Book Talk Tuesday, and we're, quilt making in America. And tonight's discussion is section 2, the quilts and quilt makers in early America, for anybody that doesn't know. And we're this quilt making in America beyond the myths is selected writings from American Quilt Study Group, edited by Laurel Horton, the lovely Laurel Horton.
I just met her last year. She is an absolute delight. I love her so much.
I thought you were gonna say like last week, and I was gonna be like, I don't think that's right. Are you
No,
still delirious?
I'm still delirious. Yes, I met her last year or last week, one or the other. I don't know.
You know what I didn't notice when we read the first section from here is that there's like these little like 3 sentence blurbs that tell you what the section's about. And I didn't pay attention before, but I did pay attention when I was reading this section. And for this section, it says, instead of relying on romantic myths about the early development of quilts in American culture, these chapters are based on a thorough examination of women's diaries, estate inventories, and industrial records to uncover the craft's more factual history.
I love that.
I right? And I also am like, where are these romantic myths?
Well, I mean, we know of a few. I mean, I think like the whole concept of, and I know we'll get to it. I don't want to jump right in right away, but the piece about quilting bees,
Mhm.
um, and the actual, evidence of what a bee was versus what a quilting was. I mean, we've heard those terms, and I think they became more mashed up later, but
Mhm.
I mean, what people say in their diaries does tell us a lot. I mean, it can't tell us everything, but it certainly points to some stuff, right?
Oh man, some of the readings they went through in here. I in my historical archaeology days, you had to do a lot of that because you had to, kind of compare what you found in the ground on a piece of land or an estate that you were working on with whatever written records they had. Bless the heart of anyone that can sit there and go through inventories and wills and all,
Hmm.
like, even to
Yes.
a certain extent, like census records and even diaries,
Yeah,
just because for one, we're so far removed from that handwriting, it's really hard to read now.
exactly. And
Yes.
sometimes those documents are in terrible shape, and
Yeah, well,
yeah.
and the ink was like would bleed, and uh,
Hmm.
just bless their heart. There are actually people that find that fun.
Yes, I've done some genealogy classes, just to sort of beef up my research skills. And yeah, there are people that are like, "Oh yeah, no problem, let me do that for you." And I'm like, "Oh, God bless you," because
Right?
I there was a woman in one of my classes. Not only did she love to read stuff, she learned Italian so that she had like a huge, I guess, Italian part of her genealogy, and she loved to read in it, like like whatever the old English version of Italian. I was like, oh my God. I wish I had that kind of patience and time, and you know, I know my limits. So I appreciate any pre-work somebody has done in in documents and stuff.
Well, also just one of those things where I need to be besties with those people. And I am so willing to share the glory if we did research together where they did, in my opinion, the real heavy lifting.
Yes. Those what makes me cranky in the old English is the S's that look like F's when they're
Hmm.
together and in the middle. And
Hmm.
I
That
know, I mean, once you learn that about how things were written, like you know it, but it's still like visually you look at that stuff and you're like, you kind of have to shake it loose out of your head to move on. It's like a,
well, and
I don't know
one
what the word
reason
I'm looking for.
I can't really like I can look at that stuff like, for a few minutes and it's interesting and stuff, but I couldn't like go in a deep dive. And one reason is I will think about it nonstop. I'll dream about it. It's one of those things like after going to Dana's auction, and that's like all I was hearing in my head was her auction chant, and I like it's along that lines. Like my
Hmm.
brain, like it'll be an ear, what's it called? An earwig,
An earworm. An
earworm,
earworm.
and
Yeah, that's funny.
and I'll just keep hearing it over and over. So can't do that. Not
And I
not.
sorry for the coughing in the background. My husband is like I think today's his bad day.
I didn't even hear anything. I thought you were sneezing. Oh, I have a picture of that.
Oh, good, good, good.
Yeah,
This is one of my favorite quilts. I love this quilt. I need to go see it. Is it still at the Shelburne?
I don't know.
I
That
think
that
it
is
is.
that is the bummer about reading books that have been out for quite some time is you don't know
Actually,
if
no, you
everybody
know
has
what?
chosen.
Was the Centennial quilt part of the Fabric of a Nation?
This particular one,
Yeah, I
I
feel
don't think
like
I don't think this was in Fabric of a Nation. I don't remember seeing. I went to that exhibit. I don't remember seeing that.
which one did you go? You went to the one in Boston, the full one.
Mm-hmm. The original one
Yeah.
that had
I was gonna
everything.
say, I was gonna say, I know Mary, the one she went to wasn't that at the,
It was in California.
oh, what is the what this is it the
The Skirt
skirt
Ball.
herbal? I always want to call it the ski ball.
While you're looking at whatever you're looking at, let me just tell everybody for next week, which will be the 12th, we're going to be moving on to section 3, Wars and the Work of Women, and Swiftly the Fair Fingers Flew. That's interesting. Hmm. I really like I mean I'm assuming it was probably Laurel Horton, but I don't know whoever titled these sections. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I like books that have, that extra little bits of information. Like you don't, they're telling you specifically, like you don't have to make a judgment.
Mm-hmm. Are you
Um,
so
I was
for
just
people
looking to see, so is it the Centennial Album quote? Let's see. I I know I've seen it in some exhibition recently, and I was not physically at the exhibition, so that's
oh,
why I keep thinking like, was it maybe just in the book here? No, the Centennial coverlet is something else. That is like an actual coverlet.
I mean, I'm sure there's a part of you that's suffering from seeing everything everywhere.
Yes, indeed there is. I suffer from that on a daily basis, but yeah, it was some very recently. I want to say that this quilt was in an exhibition very recently.
Well, let me
Um,
so you said
anyway,
you made
it
me
just
host.
happens to be one of my favorite, and I just love it. It's just a really great quilt.
So you said that you made me host so I can share my screen.
Indeed.
Since last time I talked about wanting to show some photos from what we're reading just to keep everyone on track, and then I forgot to take them. So let's see.
While you're doing that,
Am I officially sharing?
yes, although now we've switched over. No, I can see it, but
Hold on, remember there's
YouTube
a
doesn't see
lag.
it. There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
Open up. Open up. Hello.
So are you trying to make it bigger? Like,
It
oh,
was
I see
just
what you're
it was
doing.
just it was just being a pain. That's
It's in
all.
your iCloud photos. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's weird because I'm trying to like watch both at the same time, but obviously I can't do that. So here I am trying to make sure I can show people stuff, but I can't look at any comments. So that's all on you. Um,
so anyway,
anyway,
it,
this is what Steph's
this
talking about, everybody.
this is just, I love a story quilt. And to me, like this is a type of story quilt.
Hmm.
Not in the same vein necessarily as like some of the African American story quilts that I've looked up on my stream recently, but it still is. I mean, it's an album quilt, but each block is telling us something. And I think
Hmm.
that the terminology of story quilt, I think is To me, it's an umbrella. There's a lot under there. And this one is telling us so much about, life in New England. And I see it's made by the North Adams, Massachusetts family. Um, so I mean, it's telling us like so much about their daily life. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming they chose this because they were talking about, or Lynn Bonfield chose this because she's talking about, assuming that she chose the picture to go with this article. Um, I mean, she's making the point that women at certain periods was all they did was make cloth and things that had to do with cloth. And I mean, it was like a full time and a half job. But then we get into the Industrial Revolution and we look at women of wealth and it really flips it on its head. If they could supervise the production of cloth or they could purchase or import cloth, then they didn't have to make it. And then I mean, you just in terms of women's history, this is one of those things where you've really got this turning point in what it is like in the lives of women, depending on their means. Women in
For sure.
poverty were living the same life, whereas women of means had more at their disposal now based on, trade and commerce and the Industrial Revolution coming to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just back to my page here.
And the girls' work, the children's stuff. I mean, it's always like, I think the very first sentence is yeah, girls taught to sew sometimes when they're 4. Like when I was
Oh,
4, my mom was trying to get me to like start to learn how to tie my shoes because you're supposed to know that by the time you went to kindergarten. Nowadays, like I don't know if you've heard this, and I don't want to digress into other topics, but I've heard this coming out of, I want to say the UK and also in the US, where children are going off to like kindergarten not potty trained. Is that
mm.
not like, and I remember like I mean, even when my son was, you could not send a child, you could send them to daycare. Certain, daycare would take them if they were still small. Obviously, daycare takes babies. So, but if you're going to go to public school, your children need to know how to, they need to be potty trained. Um,
I do remember that kind of being a criteria.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, it's been in the news lately, and I've definitely saw it coming out of the UK as well as, and I mean, who knows why, like what? But you look at it like we've got 5-year-olds today that potentially have not even been taught how to manage a basic human function, whereas 200 years ago, see what's the dates they're giving here, 1824, yeah, so 200 years ago. We've got children that same age that know how to sew a sampler, write their name, they know their alphabet, they like whatever they sew. It's just absurd to me to think like this is how different childhoods are, you know?
I mean, every time I read sentences like that, or come across this sampler, made by, Hannah Williams, age 6.
Yeah,
And I was like, wow, she's achieving more at age 6 than I feel like I have in my late 30s.
yeah, same. Yeah. I mean, really. And I mean, so my mom got me started sewing when I was 6 or 7. So I knew how to thread a needle and I learned cross stitch. And I think a lot of kids probably in our, my age and younger, that's kind of like the gateway sewing for, especially if they didn't have moms that were, big seamstresses. My mom was, but she was kind of like, yeah, cross stitch is a little better for you because there's definitely, you see the holes you're supposed to put the needle in.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, I had like that proficiency, but was I even slightly interested in finishing something? I literally had a project I know that was like 1 inch by 1 inch, and I got tired halfway through. I was like, I don't need to finish this tree. I'm not really not interested. And I'm like, a child at that age, 200 years ago, that was expected to sit down and I mean, this was challenging for me, and I have been sewing for like 40 years. And to think that this thing would have been something that an elementary school or middle school child would have been expected to make, and the pictures of the what I think were the antique or reproduction ones, they looked really good. So I'm thinking, again, we've got children that are learning how to do this stuff, and they're being held to a standard that's pretty high. It's just it's neither here nor there. It's just blows my mind every time I read this stuff.
Hmm. I wish I tried really hard too to get a picture of the Weeping Willow counterpane
Right,
on
Jen? They were lame.
what?
Jen said some of those cross-stitch designs were pretty lame.
Oh,
Maybe that's why I think if it had been something fun like a roller skate or a cat, but now it was a Christmas tree or something.
something that like maybe your mom's age group cared about, but like not yours.
Yes.
And
Yes,
maybe,
because my
I mean,
mom
for
was
me,
going,
like if they'd had like Lisa Frank back then I
exactly.
probably could have gotten
Yeah,
on board with
yeah.
that.
And of course, my mom was going, wouldn't this be a cute Christmas ornament? Baby's first cross stitch. So yeah, you tried to get the Weeping Willow coverlet or
I did.
counterpane.
It just, I couldn't get it.
Yeah.
Like it's so, I mean, it's amazing how well they got the picture out
Yeah,
with
yeah,
it,
that'd
with
be
all that trip,
yeah.
like being white on white like that. But I mean, even this one, you can tell just the difference between like how the colors coming through. I mean,
Hmm.
I am taking it under like a yellow light bulb.
Right.
But it was more
Yeah.
so just so like people could see like what we're talking about. However, I will say the one thing I guess that's currently kind of a critique of this book is sometimes the photos of things that they choose to put doesn't really have anything to do with the article.
Right.
Because
And
this quilt in
yeah.
particular isn't really like discussed per se. It is a New England quilt though, and she's talking about 19th century New England homes. Um,
Hmm.
but she doesn't like really talk about this quilt specifically.
Well, and I'm kind of wondering if like from the perspective of, I mean, having a little bit of insight into how these papers are written, we know, you are expected to have some imagery, to describe things. And but on the other hand, I feel from an editorial standpoint, it's entirely possible that Laurel or somebody went, what else does the Shelburne have to throw in here? Because we've got too many dense pages.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What I found really interesting in this article, which I have to say, I'm very excited too that we're being exposed. I mean, I don't know, maybe you know who this person is, but I had not heard of this person before. Um, so I like that we're being exposed to new people we haven't
Yeah,
read
yeah.
anything about. And
Um,
and one of the other works that she wrote, I already have on my wish list is the Roxana's Children, a 19th century Vermont family biography, because it's the story of quilters Chestina and Sarah Walbridge. And I was
okay,
like, well, I
yeah.
want to read that.
Yeah, I saw, well, Chastain is mentioned in here, right?
Oh yeah, lots of times. But this, so
Yeah.
I'm assuming that book, I'm kind of assuming that that book is born out of
Out of
this
this paper.
preliminary writing. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah, here they are, Chastina. Yeah, the part where they're talking about, oh, and by the time you're 10 and you're really good at sewing, well, then you're gonna start weaving.
I find
Like,
it
dang.
interesting though that like based on what she's saying is like once you get into kind of like the Industrial Revolution and everything, and they don't have to spend all that time making cloth, we're still not necessarily talking a ton about quilting per se, but lots of
Right, yeah.
sewing, which
Right,
can
yeah.
be a multifaceted meaning, obviously.
Hmm. Well, and I mean that takes us to the bee, where that's on page 47, where she's talking about they had these sewing bees, but they may or may not necessarily have been about quilts, and they were not, I mean, they were about like a community service versus like a party. I mean, it still sounds like it was a party, like we had some cake, we had some milk, we got together, we made some stuff. But it's, the Harriet Beecher Stowe and the minister's wooing.
Hmm.
That's a party. We're all getting together to finish this quilt,
Hmm.
and I guess that one was like a bridal quilt, wasn't it? I think. Whereas what this person was, she's a Swedish novelist, Frederica Bremer. She says, I went to a bee and it's a sewing bee. We're sewing for people,
Hmm.
clothing,
Yeah, that
etc.
those are the people that lost everything in a fire.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so then, I mean, I guess at what point do this concept of bunch of women getting together with needle and thread become applied to quilts versus just generic sewing?
Hmm.
That's that was an interesting question for me. And like, I mean, Dr. Dunton was asking those questions too. So I see that it's pretty cool that you know, the AQSG is built on those questions.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Quiltish and Kellen.
Hey guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. And again, like on page 46, where we just like have this like, here, have a bed rug. Where we're not necessarily at all talking anywhere about bed rugs.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, Jen, that's a good question. When the papers were written, we do know it's in a 10-year period. We know that.
it's
It
80 to
was all
89. It's 80 to
yeah.
89. Yeah.
It's Sally Garoutte's editorial period, right?
Yeah. So these are like the first 10 years, the formative years of AQSG pretty much when they were really
Hmm.
everything was being put together. You could obviously, Jen, like we could obviously find out when these were published based on which uncoverings they show up in, which year.
There's a coverings like index
Yeah.
that says out there that we could just Google not Google, but
And
search
at the
the
bare
names.
minimum, these are likely all from the 80s. I don't know that this is any like work that was published prior to that and then they like republished it or anything like that.
Yeah. Um,
Hmm.
so let's see what else. I'm trying to think, was there anything else in this first one that I really um the bed rugs, and that's getting into the second paper, but bed rugs. Can we just talk about bed rugs? That's something that has always like fascinated me, and I'm like, we look at these pictures, particularly this one on page 46.
Which I did not take a picture of.
I'll hold it up. Um, but so this, and this is like I love these hooked rugs.
Mhm.
But I mean, to me, like, is that what this is? Like, I mean, you and I have an acquaintance that makes really beautiful hooked rugs in this traditional style. I mean, is that what they were? Or were they like a monk's cloth, that heavy weave, canvasy, burlappy backgrounds with, yarn or strips of wool? That what we know of as like this rug making, was that what they were?
I would not be the person to ask. I am not very familiar with the concept of bed rugs. It's the way that I envision them being used is it's a very top layer and it's heavy, but I don't know if that's true.
Yeah. Well,
Is
in the Kent County, Maryland, I mean, they've got this, this little, I don't know if I mean, it's on page
oh yeah, that shows
62.
kind of like the fibers.
That little fibers, and I'm like, that tells me nothing. And I guess, I mean, this is probably something that, yeah, Tish, like, I mean, is it an actual rug? Like what we see, like my mom has a little footstool covered with one of those. And I think it was made for the footstool, but it's that loopy, it's punch needle. It's punch needle rug making, or you could use a hook too. It
It
depends
this
on
one,
whether
I
you
mean,
go
this one it
front
says
or
it's
back.
made of dyed wools and embroidered on plain weave wool fabric, 100 by 89 and a half. I mean, I mean that's how I would understand it to be.
Yeah, but I mean the question, like in terms of like when you say embroidered, that is a way, I mean, there is a way of making a loop
Yeah.
stitch. It's called
Yeah.
turkey work, and it's how they make Turkish rugs.
I mean,
So,
looking at this photo, it looks to me to be that kind of loop work.
right. But if you flip back to in the last paper and look at this big one on page 46, to me, that looks like the kind of punch work, punch needle and
Oh,
rug
with like
stuff
yarn.
like that are, yeah, like our friend Anne Hermes is using. She's her, either strips of very thin strips of wool or wool yarn, and then it's punched in there and it makes a loop. Jen, I would say they are not like the latch hook rugs that we made. Latch hook rugs would be, the little piece of yarn, and then you're using the hook to pull it through, and then make is it a half hitch or clover hitch? Um, Whereas these are using like strips, just endless strips or yarn that it's just getting punched or hooked. It can also be a hook that it's pulled through, but it's not like latched the way that
There,
we've made rugs.
I mean, there was an exhibit of bed rugs in Connecticut in the last few years. I didn't get down to see it. But there was a bed rug in the um the MFA exhibit there that you were just talking about, Fabric of a Nation. There
Uh-huh.
was a bed rug in there. And
Oh,
I took it in as being made very similarly to what we think of as rugs on the floor.
okay. So somehow hooking either a
It
yarn
looked,
or
I
a
to me,
strip
it
through.
looked like a rug, like an actual
Hmm.
rug that they were hanging on the wall at the moment, at the time. I guess my biggest question would be not like you're questioning how it's made. I'm questioning how it's used.
Right. Well, I mean, it seems to me, I'm just looking in here. Bed rugs. Let's see, 17. So this
What are
is
you
Fabric
looking?
of a Nation. I'm
Oh,
looking
okay.
at
I
the
was gonna say,
Fabric of a
what are you
Nation book.
looking at?
Yeah, I'm looking at the Fabric of a Nation book.
You just had
Um,
that hanging around nearby?
it's one of the books that I moved it the other day. I knew exactly where it
Oh.
was. So, um, yeah, I mean, what they're showing in here are like literally rugs. I mean, and I guess this is a question, like, are what we consider to be a carpet or a rug? I mean, I would not pick a carpet or a rug up off the floor and put it on my bed because I'm like, ew, people have been walking on that.
No, it's my
Likewise,
understanding
something that
that
I like, yeah.
it's my
Likewise,
understanding that
something
like if it's a bed rug, they're not walking on it. It's
exactly, but likewise, if there's something on my bed, what would get me to take it off my bed and put it on the floor and say, well, let's just use it as, like at what point do these things become distinct? It's just, yeah,
hmm.
I don't know. It's so strange. Let's see. There's a bunch of references to bed rugs in here. So let me see if I can find another one.
Excuse me. Quiltish, are you
Um,
are you implying that Steph keeps Fabric of a Nation under her pillow or the bed rug under her pillow? Because I mean, I could definitely believe the book part.
you never know what's under my pillows.
Well, I was gonna say like she was sitting on it to make herself look taller.
Yeah, I mean what they're showing here in Fabric of a Nation, I mean they're referencing bed rugs. They're not necessarily showing pictures of them. So
Well, it sounds to me like at some point we need to just be like reading a book about bed rugs.
well, you know what event we are going to. Oh, here's one. Okay. If you happen to have the Fabric of a Nation book on page 51 is a picture of something that it's not identical to what is here that we're looking on page 46, but it's the same shape. It's very different florals, but I don't know if it's that it's the same shape. It's
Hmm.
straight across the top
So,
and then it's got curved corners.
so Kellen just gave us the very bare definition. A bed rug is an elaborately woven object that was used in colonial America on a bed instead of a floor.
Yeah, that answers nothing for us. I'm just kidding, Kellen. No, I mean, yeah. I mean, I think that maybe what one calls it, I mean, in the same way that you would say, like, oh, I put a blanket on my bed. Well, is it a quilt? Is it an Afghan? Is it,
So you're taking
some
issue with kind of
wool
the
blanket? Like,
terminology being ambiguous.
well, yeah, I'm just curious, like, what is it? Like, if somebody says, like, oh, I have bed rugs, what
Well,
do
I
they look
think
like?
one thing that would give it away for you in the moment of a distinction between a bed rug and a floor rug is the shape.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because generally speaking, the only kind of shape we see here where it's like flat at the top and then curved are now kitchen rugs that abut where your
But
sink is.
right, yeah, yeah.
But before that, like your
They,
generalized floor
yeah.
rugs aren't shaped like that.
No, they'd be round or square or
Yeah, so like
oval or
it'd be the
whatever.
same on all four sides. So like that would make a unique distinction to begin with. I also wonder potentially if maybe the backing has something on it that might make it a little less want to like take your skin off.
Well, and that's my question because again, like punch needle, which is it's a something that I have bought some supplies for and have not gotten like around to
Story of
really
my
doing it yet.
life.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's one of the 800 crafts that I have all of the stuff to make, but haven't made it. But in the way that works, you do use like the modern cloth is called monk's cloth, and I don't know what its origin is, but it's not. I mean, it's heavy and it's kind of rough, but it's not like burlap. It's not like rough like that. It's just kind of a heavy, like it wouldn't feel nice and smooth against your skin like silk, but I mean, it wouldn't like take your skin off. It's not like a Brillo pad, but I mean, did they have well, I mean, we know back in the olden times, they had many many different substrates than we have today. You know, their weaving processes and stuff were so, varied than they are today. There are so many different types of fabrics that maybe there was a specific type of fabric for this that we just don't really have an analog today and we just would use this monk's cloth or burlap or something. But yeah, I mean, and it sounds to me like it's really just for the bottom of the bed. It's like where your feet are, or maybe up to your
Oh,
waist.
you
I don't
picture it
know.
that way.
Yeah, I don't picture this thing be okay. We'll see. What's the one that's here in the book, page 46,
It's
is
huge. It's the size
100.
of a quilt.
It's square though. It's 100 by 89 and a half. So it's square.
But it's the size of a quilt.
Okay.
I could picture it covering the whole body, but the very top layer of the body. So like Jen mentioned here, like people wear a lot more clothing to keep warm. The bed rug probably did not touch their skin. I would picture
Right. Yeah.
this, the bed rug being like on top of a quilt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the
Yes,
one
and I
downside
agree.
to that is it
Yeah,
would
yeah.
wear out your textiles faster.
That too. I mean, that, again, if it is something that's rough and is being pulled or moved around, I'm guessing it's lined. I'm assuming it's got to have some kind of
I mean,
backing.
I kind of hope it has to be like it's not, these people weren't stupid, like when you consider the ways that the innovative ways that they solved problems like being cold
Hmm.
or, not being able to submerge the body in water to bathe all the time, like, they're
Yeah. Jen's got a good suggestion that one of the dating club folks, because all of those people have incredible textile collections.
well, it's funny, like so like the New England study group is big and we're multi-state.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, we haven't met in like quite some time. Because it's like herding cats. But that could certainly be brought up. I could also, I mean, for
Hmm.
all I don't know, maybe the museum has one.
Well, that is a good idea though, to check to see if you guys have your museum has anything in its inventory. But what I was going to say is you and I are going to Pennsburg in, what is it, in a month or
And
month and a
Pennsburg
half?
is the end of May, beginning of June.
Oh,
Um,
for some reason I was thinking April, but
April
yes, yes,
is
yes.
Lancaster, Lebanon.
That's right. Okay. So in a couple months, and I am taking one of the lectures about rugs, and it's more Appalachia, like it was some sisters in West Virginia, early 20th century, I think, probably moving on into the Depression. But I suspect that the person who knows about those kind of rugs might have some more historical knowledge. So if we can't get things nailed down by then, I at
Well,
least had know a
put a
person.
Quiltish put a quote here that says a coarse nappy, I don't know what nappy means, but coarse nappy coverlet used for mean beds.
Yeah, meaning like we've thrown a pile of crap on the floor for you to lay on. Now here's
I
your
know, but it
coverlet.
just the way it's presented. I picture it as like how, like in like the movie like Mean Girls. And that's
I
according to two nerdy history girls. Source is snug as a bug in a rug. I think I might have read some of that before.
Yeah, that
Susan
sounds familiar to
Holloway
me.
sounds familiar.
Yeah. Well, the nappy just means a nap. It has
No,
a
I know.
nap,
I was
like
just
it's
teasing.
fuzzy. Like, okay. I'm like, you know
Sometimes,
about this, don't you?
sometimes like when we're looking like at a quote through modern lens, I'm just like words sound silly.
Yes, they
Um,
do.
are you sufficient on the bed cover conversation to move on?
I think so.
Okay, as I say, you
Well,
got
wait.
quite into the bed cover conversation, considering it's almost
Oh,
like not in this particular article. But
well, I
there is a
mean, it is
picture.
the entire subject of the next paper. So,
You know what's funny, actually, before we move on to the next one, some of the in our first article here, like where it mentions like talking about sewing and things in like Godey's Ladies book, and we talked before about like ephemera and a lot of the magazines, like Modern Priscilla and stuff that's floating around. I have really never considered looking in the American Frugal Housewife. I
oh,
always consider
yeah.
that, and she particularly mentions that.
She
Um,
does.
and I always consider that to maybe be more about just kind of like running your household.
Hmm.
Things about economy, maybe like recipes, things, about the household stuff. And I was like, why
Hmm.
did I not think stuff might be in there? So that's another interesting thing for people to keep their eyes out for when you're out antique hunting and
Hmm.
whatever, where you might find ephemera. We could find some very interesting
Yeah.
things with that.
This one also might be one where there's a like a more modern reprint. Um, I know I have like, is it Hannah Beaton? That one's an older one. That one's like a recipe book, but that one has been reprinted like by modern people. So I'm
Hmm.
wondering if this is one of those that you could find a copy of it. Because like what the 20th edition is 1836. Like,
Hi, Carolyn. Yes, the original
oh,
weighted blanket, totally.
oh my gosh, yes. Oh, woven on a loom with short tufts of dyed wool. Now that's interesting. So that's like nothing like we've been saying, and it's like an amalgamation of weaving and rug hooking.
I mean, I wonder too, and again, like just I really don't know anything about bed rugs. I'm just asking questions, but I'm wonder if maybe potentially some differences would be, based on state or region or, whichever areas we're
Hmm.
actually using bed
Well,
rugs.
yeah, and I mean in the South, and well, and I mean getting on to the next paper, she looked at what was it from 17, is it
Yeah, so that
1710 to
we're
1820?
moving
Yeah.
on to bed coverings in Kent County,
Right.
Maryland, 1710 to 1820.
And the reason she picked those dates, 1710 was the beginning of the probate records in Kent
Mm-hmm.
County,
Mm-hmm.
which is great. That's, I mean, obviously you can't start earlier than what you don't have. But 1820, it bothers me that she stopped in 1820. And I mean, it is a huge span of time, so I get it. But 1840s, 1850s had stuff happening in Maryland that I think would be really good to have that data in here. Um, Maryland, Baltimore album quilts, 1840s. That would be such an interesting, and maybe that's just like so far removed and so far out there from Kent County, but I just would be so curious to know, like, what do those extra 20 years say,
So
or
for
30
this
years?
particular article, I just took a couple of the graphs out.
Hmm.
Um, because obviously the thing that we're most interested in is the quilt part, not as much the other textile parts. You
Well,
know what?
but it is interesting. The idea of rugs suddenly just becomes
Oh
like,
yeah.
no, no more rugs.
No, for sure.
Quilts are better.
For sure. I can't show everything.
No, I know. Um, but that
Um,
to me was just so interesting. Like that it didn't seem that these bed rugs sort of had like eased off, except to maybe under in with the um less well off people, but it really was like there was a switch. There was a point where bed rugs were just like not a thing anymore. And I'm
but
trying to
again,
think like what is there in our modern times that are like, I mean, like phones. Like there's a point where pretty much nobody, I mean, there's some people, few, but pretty much nobody uses a landline anymore. It's just kind of at
mhm.
some point, we had like a decade or 20 years of sort of a crossover, and then all of a sudden people are like, ah, who needs a landline? I got a cell phone. I mean, it's kind of like that same thing, I guess. Like,
Um, I was gonna say I still have a landline, but only because I'm just so emotionally attached to the phone number I've always had forever. But like the only thing it's used for is like emergencies or like if the town is calling with a notice of something or whatever. Um,
Um, so the Old Line State Book, I'm not sure if I have that. Um, is it a Maryland documentation book or is it just a Maryland quilt book? Because I have a Maryland documentation book, but I don't. Gloria Seaman Allen doesn't sound familiar to me, so I'm gonna have to check that out and kick myself if I actually have it, but I don't. I don't think I do. Let me make a note. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, did you notice too, just for the beginning of this, that this Gloria Seaman Allen, um, she was the former director and chief curator of the DAR, and at the time was a doctoral candidate in American Studies, Material Culture, and Folk Life at George Washington University.
Mm. Well,
So isn't that I
George Washington University has some good old history department, I believe.
well, I like the
Oh,
name of
duh.
that.
Gloria's the person that wrote this paper.
Who did you think
COVID.
I was talking about?
COVID. Well, no, when Jen's talking about the name, and I'm like, should I know that name? Yes, it's right in front of me. She wrote this paper.
Yeah, yeah, two totally different things going on here.
COVID. COVID. Um, but yes, so you were saying that she was in the she's at GW, right?
Well, what I mean, this was a long time ago. that
Right.
she
Okay.
was like
Doctoral
written
candidate.
as.
Oh, okay. I see. Yes,
No, what
doctoral
I'm pointing
candidate.
out to you is the department, American Studies, Material Culture, and
Hmm.
Folk Life at George Washington.
Yes. And we know a person that has been accepted there. It's not a big secret. So if you guys, if anybody here is not aware, Mary Vons is pursuing doctoral studies, and George Washington University is one of her one place that she's been accepted and she's considering. So, and of course, I am a proponent of that because George Washington University is only an hour for me. um, Whereas she's also looking at Boston University, which is close to Jill. So, right, we've got different agendas.
No, my only agenda is that she goes to the East Coast schools because they're so easy to get to all of them from wherever you are.
Right.
Well,
And
unless you
also
go
whoever,
like up to like Dartmouth in Maine, but
yeah, and whoever has the most money.
not Dartmouth, Bowdoin. That's what's Bowdoin.
Yeah.
But yes, yes, you go where the money is, period. End of
Oh,
story.
she's written a bunch of sampler books too. Interesting. Yeah, I'm
Are
definitely
we
gonna have to
talking
look
about the
her.
other girl? Oh, Gloria Seaman Allen's.
Yeah,
Oh, yes, it's
Jen's
the same
talking about
person.
her. So yeah.
Oh, sampler books too. See, the one thing I'm definitely enjoying from these articles is the fact that the bibliography, the references is with each article. And I don't know about anybody else, but I really like looking at the bibliography and things and the notes to see where
Yeah,
people are getting their
that's
information
where
because
I
it leads
find new
me,
books.
yeah, it leads
Yes,
me to
that
some
is where
really
I find
cool
new
stuff.
books all the
Like
time.
like from the first article, the book there about the quilting life of those Chestina and Sarah. I've never heard of that. And was like, well, noted. Oh my goodness, did anyone
Yeah,
hear
for
that?
sure.
That was Sunday sneezing from another floor in the house.
I didn't hear it. Maybe he and Rob should get together and have all of their coughs and sneezes and all in one. Um, yeah.
So, so one thing I can definitely appreciate going through this article with all the probate records and the this records and the that records is the fact that they don't she doesn't try to gloss over the fact that mostly what we can go by are only the records of the wealthy, where I feel like sometimes other people try to kind of gloss
Hmm.
over that, like it's not a big deal, and it really is. That's what tends to
Yeah,
survive.
exactly. Yes. And I don't
And
know.
points out like the bias of that, and it's important. And someone has now
Yeah,
shown
yeah.
up to troll us in the comments. You totally sneezed, sweetheart. I heard it.
I like
These screen names.
the, these AKAs that you frequently show up under.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know. I don't know that I necessarily have a whole lot more to say about the Eastern Shore of Maryland, other than, Kent County is just such it's an interesting place. The Eastern Shore of Maryland, even today, is, I mean, it's very separated from Central Maryland, as is Western Maryland, because of like geographical barriers. Like we literally have like the shore, the Chesapeake Bay comes up in there, and there's rivers that come up and literally separate parts of the state. And then you've got the same thing going on out west, where you've got like mountains that there's a pass cut through, and it's like literally even today, like one road that goes through there. So, and Maryland is such an interesting state to look at quilts wise. And, I mean, I know you and I have spent a lot of time with folks that do Pennsylvania. And so Western Maryland has got a lot of that Pennsylvania influence just because of the geographic barriers. So I think Kent County, I mean, or the whole Eastern Shore is something that I feel like if I am ever going to do any like real Maryland research, I feel like I really need to get out there and talk to the people that do the study group out there and look at their stuff, because it's literally a different world,
Is that the
historically.
one you had mentioned about going to, but you said it was kind of a pain to get to because of where it is, and that's why you didn't go?
Yeah, and yes, and when their last meeting, it was, I had gone somewhere and I had been exposed to COVID. Like I did not have it, but I'd been exposed to it, and I was like, that's the last thing I'm going to do is go and like take COVID unwittingly to a new study group. They're never going to want me back again. So I didn't go out there, but yeah, it's kind of a pain to drive out there because you have to cross the bridge and all that stuff.
My goodness, the time is obnoxious tonight. Um, well, based on this particular graph here, so when she's talking about that, we can see a very clear point where, the wealthy have kind of always had quilts and always had textiles. And then you kind of see this boom where, the lower classes are also starting to be able to become have a stronger economic hold where they can also purchase textiles or have the time to make particular textiles. And then you see, in that rise going like up to 1820, the wealthy are still always having more, but then there's a big difference between the lower classes in 1820 as opposed to when we start in 1710 and their ability to afford and or create textiles, because that's always been one of the main issues is time. If you're
Right.
not buying them,
Exactly.
you need to make them, and they're time consuming. I have a couple other graphs from here. So we've got number of quilts owned.
That one's on page 64, right?
I find it interesting that again, we hit 1780 and there's just like this just sharp incline. And even
Yeah,
in percent of people, like number of quilts and then percent of people owning quilts. Just ba-boom. Now there's graphs of these for all the other textiles that they mentioned. Bed
Yeah, the
covers,
rugs.
different
Yeah, the
types
rugs
of
are in
bed
there.
covers. Actually, I think I have the different types of bed covers ones too.
Yeah, the rugs is on 62, and then quilts
Yeah,
is
so
on
here's the different, this is
64.
one with the different types. So yeah, like you were
Yeah.
saying, Steph, here it shows this like
Yeah, it's like
steep incline in rugs, and then we just go boom,
precipitous.
boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I
Precipitous decline.
I mean that's really kind of the way with like all big fads in fashion, industry, and all, all different kinds of things.
Yeah. If it didn't incrementally change, it just plummeted.
But what's interesting is the rugs, you reach this point where it's just this massive, rapid decline. But the incline in everything else, the quilts, the counterpanes, the covers, those don't make a steep incline at the same time.
Right. It's been gradual. So like were they cold for a minute there? It was summer. This stuff happened only in the summer.
So, well, it's interesting. You would think you might see, because like what's replacing the rugs, and it based on the graph alone, it would look like nothing. Like you said, like they were cold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
There's
obviously
about
is
10 years in
probably
there.
not true. There's probably something else taking place there, but
Well,
I
and I
find
mean,
it interesting.
you kind of look at it like, I mean, she mentioned, I mean, and I think you probably just, if you've read a lot of these kind of things, you get it, where sometimes they're very detailed, in these estate descriptions, these inventories. And then sometimes they're just like, yeah, it was just a pile of this. And you're like, okay, that pile of that was probably during those years when we were making the switch from rugs to quilts or whatever other kind of bed coverings. You've just got people that were not very well versed in what they were household items they were looking at, or they just didn't care. But yeah, it really was interesting to me to look at this one chart of the different types of bed coverings, because it really does look like from about 1760 until 1800 or so. There's a 40-year winter there where oh, you know what? Those are the American Revolution years. That is a good point. We're talking about the end of the century, and I mean, what that is 1770 right there in the middle.
Yeah, and I mean it's not, I mean, it's one of those things where it's impossible to touch on all of those different things in one. I mean, for this purpose, it's a short article. That would be an entire book.
Yeah, but I mean, if you do look at the fact, I mean, again, and it's like when you when you say these things, you are making like until you have some, I mean, it's a hypothesis until you have some data to back it up. But it, I mean, 1776 does kind of fall there in the middle of all that. And I
Hmm.
mean, is it a matter of you couldn't get goods? Is it a matter of we're at war, so we're not paying much attention? And it's really only like
All the efforts go
certain,
to making other kinds of goods.
yeah, or just, in terms of like inventories, I mean, do we fall off a little bit in our civic administration at some point where, nobody's really paying attention because we're at war. Like so and so died. They had just a lot of stuff. Here, just do something with it.
There could be that too, for
Hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
Or
Oh,
if
very, very interesting. Tish. Okay. All right, Tish. Tish is Canadian, by the way.
all right, all right. Let's move on before things get heated. We can move on here to our last one.
Yes, and this was a
Um,
Sally Garoutte, and I will be honest, because of a couple things that happened today specifically, I didn't get through all the way through this one. Um,
you're like the worst student ever, not
I real
because you don't necessarily do it, it's because you tell everyone.
I've had a lot of dog ate my homework situations lately, and I don't I'm not good at faking it. So if I'm looking like I have no idea what you're talking about, it's because I didn't read it. So
Well, this one is was very interesting. I mean, so Marseilles quilts and their woven offspring. Am I saying that right?
that's
Marseilles?
Marseille.
Marseille.
Like Marseille, France. Um,
Sure.
and to me, like this is interesting because like this picture, the picture on that you got up, that's a petticoat, right? The detail of
Um,
a loom quilted silk and cotton petticoat. And
yeah.
so I know that Marseille is a type of weaving, like um I mean they're just the different types of weaving. I don't, because I'm not a weaver, I don't know how to express or put that into words, but you've got, Marseille, you've got Jacquard, you've got Madalas, like there's all of these different types of ways that they can hook fibers together on a loom.
So
And to
according to
me, when I
this
look at this, I'm
article,
like, this is beautiful quilting, but this is machine made. Like,
according to this article, the original meaning of the name usually meant a whole cloth quilt, stuffed and or corded quilt.
okay.
So basically Sally Garoutte talks about how American quilts have ignored the French influence on
Hmm.
the American quilting tradition. And before we get like too far into this, I did get a detailed shot of this like picture here that is just cool. Marseille Quilt Weavers Society.
I know, and I love they got that elephant at the top. I
Oh,
love these kind of like old illustrations from,
hmm.
1700s, 1800s, whenever.
I thought that was just
Oh, and 1875 is that one.
it's fine. It looks older than that to me, but I just think that was like really cool. It also like it also kind of like reminds me of like the circus, the way
Yeah.
that they've like laid it out on there.
Yeah.
Um, where did my thing
But
go?
I mean, I just again, like I'm really kind of just talking out of my rear end here because I have not fully read this article or this paper, but having seen these types of textiles, modern versions of these textiles, um, I guess, and I knew these things existed, but I mean, Dr. Dutton did write about Marseille coverlets a little bit, um, but I mean, I guess I've just never given enough thought to them to think like these go way back. This isn't something that we just like our technology, our weaving technology today allows us to do. This goes way back. And I was just noting the little blurb on the front first page that's referring to the picture, about it's, I mean, it's 3 layers. So I mean that it's got the quilt, kind of the 3 layers makes a quilt. But it's the way the warp and weft threads interact, I guess.
Hmm.
And then that's what creates like that almost quiltedness.
Um,
Um,
on page I think it's 73. There's
There's two little swatches that they show.
so just trying to think where
There's a patent in 1762.
yeah, that's in England that talks about the new method of quilting with a loom. Um,
So,
there's discussion right here where there's there's different meanings for the word Marseille.
right.
One's
And
the
so what?
Marseille spread and one's a quilt.
And so is the Marseille term, I mean, to me, that says like whole cloth quilt with just beautiful quilting, right? And then there's this Marseille weaving, so quilting on the loom, that turns out something that's very similar or looks the same. Is that what this is
So
saying?
I was understanding for the most part that, the fact that it's a Marseille quilt has more to do with where it was purchased,
Hmm.
and less to do. So like,
Okay, so all right, so page 73, the first column, last paragraph there says a word about nomenclature is in order. In the England of the 17th and 18th centuries, there is no evidence of a widespread hand quilting tradition such as in Provence. Provence is where they were making the corded quilts.
well, in on 72 for 2,500 years, the major seaport of Provence has been Marseille, a port
Okay.
of call for traders. As many the quilts of Provence inevitably found their way into the traditional trade, probably during the 17th century. When they arrived in England, they were referred to by their place of purchase, Marseille quilts.
Okay. So then, yes, what we were originally, was it somebody else said it or you said it, that the Marseille quilt is a heavily quilted corded
Mm-hmm.
thing. So
That's
yeah.
originally what she uses as the original example. And then if we look at one of the other, this one here, which is in Ohio,
Hmm.
um, this one they're saying is the detail of a spread, which if
Hmm.
my understanding is correct here, is when they're talking about the one created with a loom. They do,
Yeah.
she does go into detail about how they like did the cording and especially with making petticoats and things.
Hmm. And
Yes.
Tish says, um, I'm reading that you could buy yardage of Marseille cloth. Yeah, I mean, you can
Mhm.
today. There's,
It
I
is
mean,
discussed in here too, yeah.
yeah, I worked at a fabric store for a while, and yeah, you could buy yardage of
Mhm.
Madalas and hem it yourself and make the beautiful
Yeah, that's what they
bedspread.
were saying is the major function of the um yardage was to make petticoats and things like that.
Hmm. But I mean, gosh, how beautiful. I mean, I just going back to the frontispiece picture for this
Hmm.
paper.
Hmm.
Just again, to me, that just looks like just beautiful, perfect quilting. But it makes so much sense that if there's some way you'd set it up on a loom to do that, you know, that makes life easier. But I
But
still cannot wrap my head around how.
but I mean, Sally Garoutte is right. Like there's no way that you could ignore this original influence
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
something that's being purchased in England, and then you have English immigrants coming over to America. Like there's no way that there can't be influence on American quilt making.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Whole cloth stuffed or quarter quilt. Yeah. Um, yeah, no, it's interesting here. And again, I think this is what you just read on page 72, where she's saying quilt in England might mean either a bed quilt or a petticoat. Um, we were reading on my stream Avril Colby's book, and she was a British writer, and she talked a lot about this kind of stuff. And she didn't really bring up, necessarily because she was really specific to England, the UK, but she didn't really talk about the French influence. But, I do remember some of that, and I don't remember where I'm going with this, so I'll just leave it at that.
I think you were talking more about like kind of words having different meanings.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And so yeah, the idea of quilt and quilted and um, something that is quilted. Like they didn't in the UK, like way back, it was quilted armor. It was padded clothing. That was where they put, petticoats were quilted
mhm.
before quilts were made. And it's interesting to me that somebody wouldn't have come up with that idea of like, well, this thing would be awfully warm to wrap myself up in at night versus wearing it as a skirt.
I mean, it was probably as simple as saying, like, if this petticoat keeps me warm underneath my clothes, then why not take that technology and make it bigger to put on top of my
hmm
bed?
On top of a bed, exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
A draw loom. I don't know. What is that? A draw loom?
I I'm guessing it's a type of loom.
Yes. Um, yeah, I don't know what that is, Tesh. If you have a link or something that you could give us.
Since we're coming to the end of our stuff here, I'm gonna stop
hmm
sharing.
Oh,
So,
and here it is, as I can always, I mean, I've only brought Dutton into this 5 times already, but on page 76, she quotes Dutton.
oh yeah,
The early,
I should have
yeah,
mentioned that she's already
yeah,
talking.
yeah. Yeah, he recorded 8 applique coverlets, yep. And Axa Goodwin Wilkins. Yep. And what was really interesting, he had the Marseille coverlets, or two, I think it was two Marseille coverlets belonging to this woman in New York who, um, I think that's one of the pieces I cut out of my recent lecture on Dutton, just because I was running out of time. Like I knew I would never get it all done, presented. But there was a woman in New York who was she was a society lady, we'll put it that way, and she had these two Marseille coverlets, and I was dying to see them. And I was certain, I was like, surely at least one of them made it into his book. Because I
Hmm.
don't know whatever happened to them. There was this whole thing where she basically dumped them on him. She was trying to get him to sell them for her.
Hmm.
And I don't know whatever happened to them. If they went back to her at some point, I don't know. It's really interesting. That's like one of my zillion questions to answer. Um, but I had hoped that, at some point that I would know what her coverlets looked like. And but it looks like everything that he looked at that he put in his book was Axa Goodwin Wilkins stuff.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm guessing that Erla Rodashevitz's Marseille coverlets were not as nice as uh Axa Goodwin's.
Man, that's a name, huh? Erla Rodashevitz.
Arla Radishevitz. Well, Axa Goodwin Wilkins is another one. And oh gosh, it was either her sister or her mother had a very similar strange name. And I think they're biblical of some sort, but um, yeah, one of you guys might know. Okay, so a draw loom, that's what it was made on. The warp threads were drawn up to make the quilted. Okay. Well, I'm wondering if that's like double gauze. I don't know if you've ever
I
done
have
any
not.
garment sewing. And I know
No.
some quilters actually use double gauze too. And it's like 2 layers of cotton gauze that have been, they're on top of each other. And they even make triple gauze. I don't know how they do that, but you can tell if you try to pull the layers apart, you can tell like there is like one of the threads is like in there, it's like attaching the bottom layer and
Hmm.
it's done within the weaving.
Hmm.
And it's going down in there and it's catching that other layer. And so I guess it's the weft. The warp is the long ways and the weft is the crossways.
Hmm.
Woven on, not when.
Earlier she said that's what it was when on, and she meant woven on.
Oh, it was woven on. Okay. Yeah. So, oh, that's interesting. I'm gonna have to look those up. I'm curious. That technology. I mean, it's ought to all be kind of similar, right? Like how they're made, like just something as simple as double gauze cotton. It's got to be kind of somewhere in the same realm of getting your shuttle, or
Hmm.
what do you call it, and getting it down below like multiple layers. You're not just talking about one layer of fabric. You're talking about a fabric that's got multiple layers, and getting it all the way down in there sometimes, but not always.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
Carolyn
interesting.
said double gauze is so wildly unruly. One baby quilt with that, and I'm done.
Yes. I have made a couple of double gauze garments and they're so soft and snuggly, to wear. But yeah, they want it's like with silk or anything that's sort of got like like you can't starch the bias out of it. Like it just wants to be wiggly and yeah, there's so many fabrics
If
that are
you were
like
making
that, but
garments out of that, are you hand sewing those garments or machine?
machine.
So I would wonder, like, with those kind of more unruly fabrics, would hand sewing make them a little easier to deal with?
Probably. I mean, I think the only fabrics that I think are worse to try to hand sew would be really thick, heavy fabrics. Anything that's lightweight and kind of, wiggly, you can really tame it better doing, hand sewing because you can really take your time and baste and do all that stuff. Yeah, that's why I'm a hand sewing person.
I mean, I strive to be. I mean, maybe if I could start with maybe something as small as, like, like a sunbonnet Sue and make a Duncan Sue.
Hey, you should show off your Duncan Sue. I keep
I
meaning
can
to.
show off my Duncan Sue. Hold
Do you
on.
have it nearby? I keep
Yeah.
I keep meaning now that you've received it, I was going to post it on Instagram and I haven't. So,
And look, I was sitting in such a way as to cover up the quilt I like put up.
oh yes, yes, yes. That is such a beautiful quilt, and we looked at it the other day, right? That was one of your
Yep,
unboxing quilts.
that was one of the
Yeah.
unboxings. I had started, oh my God, oof, I'm stuck. I had made such a mess when I was unboxing stuff. Like, you should have seen, there's a bed here next to me that has mostly quilts folded on it that I currently have listed on my Instagram, but there is still plenty of bed available. And the pile of quilts that was on this bed from unboxing and then taking a few things out of my inventory to show. And by the time I was done with the unboxing, I was just over it. I was just like, I'm leaving the room. Like, I don't have time to put this away. And I came up here the following day and was holding stuff to put away. Like, you don't understand how out of shape your shoulders are until you're standing there full after like 4 or 5 quilts. I was just like, okay, I can't do this anymore right now. So I hadn't finished. And when I came up here tonight, I was just like, everyone keeps seeing the same thing. What I really need to do is, so like this ceiling here has got a slight slant. It's not like a ridiculous slant, but I feel like up top of it, I need to hang like some hooks.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
and then
can
you could just
hang, because
like,
I could hang a quilt straight down. They would just come forward a little bit. But
mhm.
I feel like, when you're looking at my view, there's just so much wasted space of seeing that hint of green wall back there.
Yeah, yeah, you could do
So,
something like, my trashy wall divider that and
okay,
change. So you're still the host. Change it to the gallery setting because I think
change it to
you
the
got on.
gallery setting. Hold on one
Yeah, I think it should be
second.
top right hand corner. Change from speaker to gallery,
View
and then it'll show us
gallery.
both.
Okay, that better?
Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. I don't
Um,
know. It seems to be like it seems to want to do what it's gonna do. Like I'm. There we go.
as I say, you're just not paying attention to the fact that there's a lag on YouTube. So here is, I'm just gonna put something behind it so that that's not big enough. Ah, here is the lovely, am I in camera?
There you go. Yep.
Here's the lovely Duncan Sue that Steph made me. And there's on the back.
Duncan Sue.
And that's the sweetest thing ever. I love
And
I love
what I didn't put on there because I thought, maybe one day you would show this off and probably don't want to have any profanity on it. But I was like, this bitch has a dress made out of dresses.
why, of all the people in the world that might not want profanity on something that they own, why would it be me?
I don't know. One day you might reform yourself. I don't know.
Mm, I
Okay,
take
well,
pride in my profanity, but can we just like talk about, like, not only the fact that the Dunkin' Donuts cup is like too legit to quit, but like, you even made sure that the DD on the Dunkin' Donuts is different
yeah.
colored. embroidery
Oh,
thread.
right, because they're orange and pink, and then the straw
Yes.
is orange.
But like if I made my own Duncan suit, I don't know that I would have paid enough attention to make those things different.
I never see you without a Dunkin' cup except tonight when you appear to have a Burger King cup. I've never seen such a thing before.
You never see me with a Dunkin' Donuts cup this late at night. Like never,
Okay.
ever, ever. I would just like needed a little pick me up. I was like, I need some soda.
Yeah.
So I got that because I was on my way home from a doctor's appointment. Um I don't have it with me, but you had also given me that cute little like beaded strawberry in that little
Hmm.
jelly container. Did you make that too?
I did. Those I was making those a few years ago. That's probably more than a few years ago. And I made a whole bunch of them. And I just happened to come upon one when I was looking through one of my sewing like my big sewing basket. And I was like, I bet Jill would like this because it's like a little.
It is so well, I thought it was really funny that you like sent it in like one of those little like jelly
Well, the reason I put it
things.
in the jelly jar, you guys, I put it in one of my little the little Bon Maman jelly jars from my advent calendar was because I had set it aside for you and my cat got on the table and was like, "Oh, a new cat toy." And I found it like in the corner covered in like a ball of cat fur and I was like, "Okay, I'm going to clean this off."
That's
And then
better
I'm
than I thought. I thought you were gonna say I found it in the litter box.
no. He
And
had
then you
just
were
kicked it
like,
around.
does it smell? No, it's still good.
Nah, he'd kicked it around the living room, and so I put it in the jar just to keep it safe. And then I was like, it's kind of cute in the jar,
Yeah,
actually.
I think
So
it's really cute
maybe
in the jar. It's
I'll
like
have to
a
make some more, and that's what I'll do with the rest of my jars.
yeah, it's like this like cute little like specimen. I was like, that's at first I was like, the hell is that? I opened it. I was like, oh, that's so cute. And here I was thinking, like, I was like, oh, that's really cool. She put it in there so it didn't get smushed, like in transit, not like so the cat didn't eat it and throw it back up.
I don't worry about things getting smushed as much as I worry about them being eaten by cats.
Well,
Well, I think it's about that time, you guys.
yeah.
I'm seriously spiraling back down to couch horizontal. Um, so
Well,
it has
everybody,
been a
um,
good night.
yes, and just to remind you for a third time,
Ah, yeah.
next week, which is, did I say the 12th? Yes, the 12th. We'll be looking at Wars and the Work of Women and Swiftly the Fair Fingers Flew. Those are their
During
quotes, not
times
mine.
of armed conflict. All
So
right.
that's what we'll be going at. We'll be here. Don't forget that Steph is streaming on her Twitch on Mondays and Thursdays at 2. You can follow her on Twitch and she's on Instagram and she's on Facebook. Make sure you're following Quilt Nerding on Twitch or on Instagram and Facebook. There's too many things. There's just too many things. And if you want to look at the life of dealer things, you can follow my business page, JA Antiques and Vintage on Instagram. I also have a YouTube for that, which has some cute videos on it of the show Steph and I did together last year, as well as a couple others. And I need to get back to putting some videos on there of kind of day in the life of a dealer. And those are all the places that you find us.
It's
And like,
sometimes we remember to cross-reference those. So
yeah, I mean, I try really hard. I think I do pretty good most of the time. And then
you
sometimes
do.
I will kick Steph in the butt to post her own stuff that I can then share to different places.
I tend to be
But
forgetful.
I think that's gonna do it for us tonight. So,
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. It's so good to see all of you, and we
and we're so
appreciate
glad that
this.
you're better. You're
Oh,
sounding a lot
yeah.
better.
Yeah. I am feeling a lot better. Just if I can be awake more than I'm asleep, that's my next hurdle.
All right,
I think I'm
everybody.
getting there. All right,
That's
have a
what we
great night,
press.
y'all.
Bye.
Mwah, mwah.